me. That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes, a podcast about lawyers using their authentic voices to change the world.
Whatever you're passionate about, do it. And take care of yourself while you're doing it, but don't let anyone limit you. Even if you're a third-year associate and you've got this desire to start a business, start the business. And you'll figure out how to make it work, but live your life from that place of abundance and give yourself the freedom to live out all of the potential that you have. And I know that being the CEO at Chani makes me a better CEO at Freefrom and vice versa. And being a mom now makes me better at all of it and vice versa. And so don't deprive yourself in that way.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes. I'm your host, Merle Vaughn. Here to BS with me today is Sonya Passi, whose story I find fascinating and who will no doubt inspire all of you to embrace your authenticity. Hey, Sonya, how are you doing?
Hi, Merle. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited. I've wanted to do this interview for a while now.
Likewise. Thank you for being so patient while I had a baby.
Yeah. That's a good excuse, believe me. So wanted to give our listeners a little background on you. I don't go into long descriptions, but because I like to kind of give you an opportunity to do that yourself. But I will tell everybody that Sonya is the founder and CEO of Freefrom. She's also the co-founder and CEO of Chani. She was an associate at Morgan Stanley as an investment banker for a short stint after graduating from law school. During law school at Berkeley, which we both are alumni of, by the way. She founded the Family Violence Appellate Project. Sonya attended Cambridge for her BS and her master's in philosophy, then went on to UC Berkeley School of Law. Apparently ditched us for a year and went to Harvard Law. Mm-hmm. I can't be mad at you for that. What did I miss, Sonya?
You didn't miss anything. That was pretty comprehensive.
Okay, and you went to Cambridge. You were also the head girl at your high school, your boarding school. So does that mean that you grew up and that you're from the UK and you grew up in the UK?
It did. I didn't go to a boarding school, but I was the head girl of my school, which I guess we call class president here. But you really went back into the archives, Merle.
Oh yeah,
that little tidbit.
Oh yeah. I love that stuff. What was that like? I mean, was that so? Tell us a little bit before we get started on your career. Tell us your story. Who are you? Where are you from? Who has inspired you? Was it teachers? Was it family? Did you have to do it yourself? Give us an idea of your journey.
Yeah, I grew up in the UK. I was born and raised in Manchester, England. I didn't actually move to this country until I went to law school. So when I was 22.
Okay.
There were two kind of pivotal moments for me in my teenage years. The first was we did a lot of fundraising at our school for, local charities, and I loved it. And every year I took it upon myself to plan my class's fundraising event. And they were always very, very successful. and we would raise a ton of money. And it kind of became the thing each year of like, what was our class going to do as our big fundraiser, because it raised so much money. Like oftentimes classes would do a cake sale and, raise a couple $100s, and we were raising like thousands.
Wow.
And I saw a friend from high school a few years ago, and I had forgotten this part of my journey, but she was able to witness for me and say, back then what you were doing was you were just kind of building the skills that you were going to need for this part of your life.
Interesting.
And then when I was a teenager, I very much thought that I wanted to be a human rights lawyer. At the time, Tony Blair was the Prime Minister of England. His wife, Cherie Blair, was a human rights lawyer. And it was the first time in my life that I had seen a prime minister's wife who was, quite frankly, much smarter and more accomplished than the prime minister.
Wow.
And so it was inspiring as a young woman to see a woman with that much intellect and leadership really having great impact on a global stage. And so, as you do when you're that age, you kind of model yourself off the people that you see. And I want to be a human rights lawyer.
Wow.
And so in my efforts to kind of learn more about what that meant, I started an Amnesty International group at my high school that year. I was 16.
Wow.
And, when you start a group like that, the Amnesty sends you all of the information and the materials, and you do activism around it. And their global campaign that year was violence against women.
Got it.
And, I'm reading the materials, and, the first bullet point says, 1 in 3 women globally will experience gender-based violence. And I just remember, I was a keen and eager 16-year-old. I read the paper every day. I watched the news every day. And I remember being so flabbergasted that I wasn't hearing about this as breaking news every single day. 1 in 3 women. It's like, that is a global crisis. How am I reading and learning about this for the very first time in a pamphlet that I had to sign away for, send away for?
Right.
And I had grown up witnessing and experiencing and being proximate to a lot of different kinds of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have words for it. And nobody talked about it. And yet I understood, like, it was in me, like an understanding or a feeling like this was my calling and my passion was there. And in that moment, it kind of crystallized. And it was like, this is what I am going to spend my life working on.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so
you're 16.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I just feel so fortunate that I figured out that early in my life what it was that I wanted to do. And so I started by hosting awareness weeks at my high school on intimate partner violence. And then when I went to college, when I went to Cambridge, I started a group that was educating campus students and local high school students about intimate partner violence and dating violence. And then by that point, I knew that this was the work that I wanted to do in the world. I had no idea what that would look like, but I was introduced to this as a human rights problem. And so I felt strongly like going to law school was going to give me tools and understanding and a framework within which to address this, be it through policy or law or strategy. And so I chose to go to Berkeley Law because it has one of the best, if not the best, domestic violence law programs in the US, certainly, and I think in the world. And my whole personal statement for law school was about ending violence against women. And it was only in law school when I started my first nonprofit that you mentioned earlier, the Family Violence Appellate Project, that I really kind of was able to connect what I'm passionate about with what I'm good at and kind of launch me into this trajectory that has become my career. But to go back years to your initial question of who inspired me,
Yes.
it was the elders in my life. It was my teachers. It was, I had a, a person in my life who was she was essentially my godmother. Her name is Bridie. She is a 6-foot Scottish woman. And she taught me at a very, very young age what community was and how you show up as a neighbor and a friend and a community member, and what kindness looked like. And my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, both um, were both so involved in their community and always figuring out how to give what they had.
Mhm.
And so these were my models. These were my models. And these were the people that affirmed in me my desire to live a life of service.
Amazing. And so how did your family and your community feel about you leaving to go to Berkeley for law school?
You know, my mom is brilliant. She is wicked smart. And she was born and raised in India and grew up in a time when her future was as a mother. She was married. She had an arranged marriage at the age of 19 to my father.
Wow. Mhm.
And so she never got to live out that part of her life.
Mm.
And I feel that, I don't know what it's like for you, Merle, but I feel it very much for women of my generation. Is a lot of what we are living out is the unlived lives of our mothers and our grandmothers.
Yeah.
And so I think for my mom, she so wanted and encouraged uh, that for me, because she she had wanted it herself. You know,
Right.
my mother would never. All she wanted was for me to have the very best education that I could. And I remember when I first said to my parents that I wanted to go to law school in the US, my dad's immediate reaction was to say no.
Yep.
And my mom's immediate reaction to my dad was to say, if you don't say yes to this, I will sell my engagement ring and use that money to send her.
Wow.
And she so fiercely, I think almost on an unconscious level sometimes, she so fiercely understood that my freedom depended on my financial security, and my financial security depended on my education.
Yes. Yeah, and we're from different generations. I'm I'm much older than you, but I can really relate to that story. I had something kind of similar when I grew up in Compton, and it had gotten to a point where it was pretty bad, and my mother really wanted me out of Compton, and I had an opportunity to go to USC early when I was 16, and on this special program, and my father said no.
Mhm.
Um, and my mother would never have like been that bold with my father. I mean, there's a lot we can talk about what you're
Mhm.
doing, right? In terms
Mhm.
of financial insecurity and financial abuse and all that kind of stuff. But she just said to me, "You're going. We'll figure it out.
Mhm.
I'll deal with it. I'll take the consequences.
Yeah.
And so, that those kind of, so yes, I can totally relate to that
Yeah.
experience, and the fact that our mothers
Yeah.
wanted better for us than what they had.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so you go to Berkeley, you go to law school, you do found, so now it makes sense why you chose Berkeley, and the
Mhm.
fact that you founded the Family Violence Appellate Project. All that makes sense to me. What I'm
Mhm.
trying to understand is why you went to Morgan Stanley.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes people think that free from was the deviation from investment banking, and I say actually investment banking was the deviation from a long commitment to gender-based violence for two reasons. The first was I'm not a citizen of the US, so I didn't have the ability to come out of law school and do this work full time. Doing this
Mm,
work full time looked like either starting my own nonprofit or going to work at a nonprofit. I needed a big corporation that was going to sponsor my visa.
okay.
What I knew very clearly was I did not want to be a lawyer. And I did not want to, I wanted to innovate in the space of gender based violence. And I was passionate about business. I was passionate about innovation. I was passionate about startups and disrupting the space and transforming the space. And I felt like what I saw of corporate law in my internships, my summer internships, was using kind of almost like the reverse skills. And so I knew I didn't want to do that. I knew I had to get a job at a big corporation.
Hmm.
And what I had learned through the process of starting the Family Violence Appellate Project was running a nonprofit is running a business.
Yeah.
On a structural level, you need to know accounting, you need to know business strategy, you need to know audits and budgets and all the rest of it. And you know, the first couple of years that you will spend in finance as a junior is basically just like a crash course in finance and accounting. And that felt like valuable skills that I did not have. I was a history major in undergrad and then a law student. So I didn't have any of that in my toolbox. And I knew that that was those were skills that I wanted and needed. And that was a great opportunity to do that. So I went to work at Morgan Stanley for 2 years. We learned exactly all of that
Hmm.
and uh, met my now wife,
Hmm.
fell madly in love with her. And the day after, she's an American citizen, the day after we got married, I gave my notice at work and filed my green card paperwork, gave my notice at work, and then began, looking to the work that it was that I really wanted to do for the rest of my life.
That's amazing how it all fell in place.
I
That
know.
reminds me of a question that came up when you were talking about your mom. Is Would it have even been possible that an arranged marriage was something that they would have wanted for you?
Oh, it was what they wanted for me.
Really, even your
Yeah.
mother.
Even my mother. I think
So,
it's really hard, and I wonder what your experience with you or what your mom's experience was as when you are the woman of the generation that is not free.
mhm,
I think you hold the duality and the complexity of that. There was a part of my mother that wanted freedom for me. And I'm not also saying that you can't have an arranged marriage and be free, but she wanted total freedom for me.
mhm,
And there was a part of my mother that was wedded to the tradition that she lived within.
Yes.
And if an arranged marriage wasn't for me, then what did it say about her life?
Mm,
And my parents do not have um the language of self-reflection and healing, and therapy is not something that is on the table. So it's hard to hold both.
right.
And so I was the first girl in my family, on my uh, um, father's side. I was the first girl of all of the brothers and in the family. And so I was kind of just uncharted territory for everyone.
And then you married a woman.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
How
And
did that
so
go over?
it did not well, like it's not something that my family has ever been able to recover from,
Mm,
my immediate family. And ultimately to their loss, and it's to my loss too, but I know now as a parent that any way in which I reject my daughter, it will hurt my daughter, but it will actually break my soul.
right.
And that is something that I've really come to understand. And, elders in my life would always say to me, you know, I really feel for your parents because they're hurting themselves more than they're hurting you. And I really, well, that's cute because I'm pretty
Yeah.
hurt,
Right.
I'm pretty hurt,
Right.
but please feel sorry for my parents right now. But when my daughter was born, I really understood what they were saying. I really understood that the as while I have the capacity to hurt my daughter, and I no doubt will, and hopefully will work through that with her in a very different way, but um, it's me that I hurt in that moment. She is so protected, and it is me that I would hurt, and it's a level of maturity in my own healing that I don't think I ever could have got to were I not a parent at this point in my life.
Well, and I'll tell you, I am a grandparent. My daughter and son-in-law had identical
Congratulations.
thank you, had identical